Thank you for the introduction, Cody. I appreciate it. And, once again, my name is Ben Falter. And I'd actually like to start my talk with a little bit of an audience participation activity. So, get ready to participate. So Cody, if you don't mind advancing the PowerPoint one slide so that people can see a picture. What I've got here is actually an artifact from our collections at OCHS. And I have one very simple question that I'd like to ask everybody to give me their best answer on. Judy, you are not allowed to answer as you're the one who donated this. What the heck is this thing? Oh, all right, we've already got a taker. Let me set this down on the table over there.
You don't know? Anybody else know?
I can't say the word.
It's a hem marker.
That is correct. It is, in fact, a hem marker. Yes, so this was a hem marker from sometime between 1930 and 1950. And basically you had this wooden measuring stick that's inserted into the metal base. You had powdered chalk in a little container there that you could adjust the height on, and a little slit on the thing that holds the powdered chalk. And what you would do is when you were measuring the hem, a person would stand there, another person would walk around with the hem marker, pump the hand pump there to mark where the hem needed to be drawn up to.
The person turns.
The person turns.
And then
Yes, right. So, anyway, you have a mark on the hem at the right level in chalk, so it's not going to leave a permanent mark. So, this thing we just did just now is an example of something that I've been doing in little videos that I've been making for our social media channels. The videos are called "What the Heck Is That Thing?" where I take an item from our collections in the Historical Society and I present it and explain what it is, what it was used for, some of the history behind the item. Now, these videos in core concept are not really that much different from a very traditional approach to museum education. History museums and historical societies have, for a long time, probably since the idea of a museum came into existence, have sought ways to show off items in their collections, right? Particularly things that we can't display on the floor. I mean, there's only so much public space in any given organization, but part of what organizations like OCHS exist for is to educate people. And we would love to show off every single item in our collections every single day, but that's just not possible. So many history museums and historical societies have sought ways to give the public access to things in private collection storage. And this is often done through something like a behind-the-scenes tour, or perhaps bringing out select items for special events. So, for instance, just last month we had the bike ride, and during that event we had pulled out a couple of bikes from our collections that people could see during the event. So these sorts of things are something that historical societies and history museums have always been doing. The only thing that really makes my "What the Heck Is That Thing" videos different than this history of showing off items, behind the scenes items, is how the content is being presented, both in terms of tone and in terms of where that information is being presented. with tone, I hope I demonstrated well, just by the sheer name of what the heck is that thing, that the tone is very, very casual. And this is, of course, to make it easy for people to engage with it. Easy for people who are not regularly coming to museums, regularly coming to historical societies. It's meant to make it easier for those sorts of folks to engage with this material and make it accessible. But the other way is, of course, that these are short videos that we're posting online on our social media channels. Specifically, we're posting them on our Facebook page as well as our TikTok page. Now, you may have seen these videos if you do follow us on Facebook, but these are made primarily with the TikTok platform in mind. So for those of you who don't know what TikTok is a video sharing social media platform that went worldwide in 2018. Its origins predate that a little bit, but it went global in 2018. And TikTok is one of the most popular platforms out there right now. And the basic idea of TikTok is that users can create, share, and view short videos. So typically somewhere between 30 seconds to 3 minutes long. So these are really bite-sized. The idea is that if they want to watch some TikTok videos, they open the app on their phone and they watch a video, and then they scroll up and they see a new video pulled up based on what other videos they'd like to watch. Now, TikTok as a platform is primarily popular with people from Generation Z and also younger millennials. There are certainly people outside of these demographics that enjoy using TikTok, but these are the primary age groups that TikTok is popular with. So using a platform like TikTok, aside from the accessibility of these very informal, very short videos, using a platform like TikTok allows us to reach a group of people who are not your typical museum goers. These are Gen Z folks, younger millennials. They are not coming to history museums and historical societies all that frequently. So, it's getting people to come in, it's still providing an educational experience, and it's easy, it's fun, it's accessible, and this really gets at the core of what I want to talk to you about today. So, the theme of the talk is OCHS re-envisioned and revitalized. And this gets at the idea that what we're trying to accomplish is not to throw out what we've done in the past. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is take what has worked in the past and evolve it for the modern day. And I would like to talk about 3 examples of things that we are doing that really speak to this idea. So I'd like to start by talking about lectures and book talks. So, the lecture, the book talk, this is of course a staple piece of programming in terms of what museums do of educational experience at museums. And the core concept of doing lectures and book talks is a good one, right? You're introducing people to new information, to new ideas that they maybe haven't been exposed to before. And that's part of what we exist to do. So, we've of course had at OCHS many lectures and book talks over the years. Generally speaking, though, across the board, interest in and attendance to book talks and lectures has been declining, generally. And this is not just at OCHS, it's at many similar organizations just across the board are experiencing this same idea, this same downward trend in attendance to these sorts of events. And this was already in motion before before 2020, but certainly the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated this issue. So when the lockdown first began in March 2020, suddenly organizations couldn't host these sorts of events in person. And so many places had to look for ways to still have programming, but do so in a way that didn't gather a bunch of people in one place at the same time. And what many organizations did was to move virtual, to move these sorts of events virtual. As some examples, the American Association of State and Local History, they have an annual conference. They started offering a virtual conference. And, it was apparently very well attended because even now, after in-person conferences have returned, the American Association of State and Local History still offers a virtual conference as well. The Strong Museum, where I came from, they have, for several years, been hosting an event called Women in Games, which is an event that highlights women involved in video game development. And of course, with the pandemic, they could no longer have this event in person, so they moved virtual, brought in the speakers virtually to give these talks. And then, it's not just museums and historical organizations that did this during lockdown. Bands put on virtual concerts during lockdown. One band that I quite like, Dropkick Murphys, did some virtual concerts during lockdown. So, a lot of organizations are looking into virtual options. And many people enjoyed these sorts of virtual events. Attending a lecture or a book talk, in particular, from the comfort of one's own home, has some pretty big advantages, right? Number one, you can sit on your couch, you can be in your pajamas, you can eat your dinner during the talk, you can have a drink during the talk, you don't have to find a babysitter if you've got kids at home, you don't have to worry about driving if the weather's bad. This is a very, very flexible way to engage in this material and comfortable. Now, of course, the trade-off is that you are losing that in-person experience, that live feedback, but there are some things that can mitigate what you have lost, in particular when it comes to a Q&A session during a talk. There are ways to still facilitate that virtually. So, for many people, this trade-off was and is worth it. And the data really backs this up. The American Association of Museums put out a survey to hundreds of museums all across the country, and the results showed that, generally speaking, physical visitation to museums is down. But virtual engagement and virtual attendance is up. So, with that in mind, let's meet people where they're at. Over the last year, we have begun experimenting with virtual lectures and book talks. We've had 4 lectures and or book talks over the last year. 2 of them were purely virtual, and 2 of them were a hybrid in-person virtual, where you could come in person or you could watch virtually. And virtual attendance was simply better than in-person attendance. And also an added benefit of having these talks virtually is that the videos of these talks can remain on our YouTube channel and continue to generate views, continue to have people getting that educational experience even after the talk is over. In the 4 lectures and talks that we've had the last year have generated 314 views over the last year. Now, in the space that we would typically hold these talks, in the basement at OCHS, if you've been in, you know what space I'm talking about, downstairs, outside of the kitchen, There is no way we could fit anywhere close to that many people in that space. So, despite the fact that for the most part COVID restrictions have been lifted, people are really enjoying the benefits of virtual programming. And as an added benefit that we didn't even necessarily think about initially, was that we're able to reach people outside of our area with these sorts of talks. For one of our talks by Kathleen Earle, it was titled Escape to the Finger Lakes, there were people watching that talk from the Midwest, and they were able to make connections to their own family history, their own genealogy, by tuning into this virtual talk in Canandaigua, New York. So this is obviously adding huge educational benefit to both our audience, but also to people all the way across the country. So we're taking what we've learned over the last year, and we're applying it to our next major educational program, and this is, of course, where I make a quick plug for an upcoming event. So over the winter months, we're hosting our first, hopefully annual, virtual winter speaker series. So these are 4 talks. We've got a December talk, a January talk, February talk, and a March talk. And they are all tied into the current exhibit theme that we have called Fibers of Our Lives. And they will be hosted through YouTube, but through private links. So, you do have to purchase a link in order to attend live in person. At $5 each, $17 for a package of all 4. And, we're bringing in lots of different speakers. Our first speakers, Matt Wedd and Amelia Craven. They're from the Canandaigua Institute in Pennsylvania. They wouldn't be able to come up and give a talk with us normally in person. And similarly, our last talk, Hallie Bond, she's coming from Long Lake, New York. That's up in the Adirondacks. Again, that's a bit of a distance to travel. Would be more difficult to get her to come in person, but hosting virtually allows us to bring in folks from outside of our local area to give these sorts of talks, and allows folks from outside our local area to attend these talks. Also, we have the potential to use these videos in the future, right? We can still save the videos from these virtual talks, just like we did with the ones from this last year, and use them for continuing educational programming. So this is, again, hopefully our first annual iteration of this. The idea being that each year the talks would be themed around whatever the current exhibit theme is. And of course, having it in the winter months when people are more likely to want to stay inside anyway, helps encourage people to want to still engage with us during the winter, and gives people something to do, right? If this is something that's happening every year, people are going to look forward to it. What Cody was saying about establishing traditions, establishing things for people to look forward to doing every year. So I hope you'll all join us and attend this virtual series. But even if you don't, I hope that I have aptly demonstrated that this move to a virtual lecture, this move to a virtual book talk, it's not a break with traditional museum education, right? We've always been doing book talks, we've always been doing lectures. It's just a re-envisioning of that idea for today. But to shift gears, let's switch from talking about museum education from the comfort of your own home to something you can go do in person, which is, of course, the museum tour. This is a stock photo. This is surprisingly not at the Ontario County Historical Society. But another major pillar of traditional museum education is, of course, the tour, right? History museums and historical societies have been doing tours forever, right? Whether it be a live walking tour or a self-guided tour or a special event tour. And at the Ontario County Historical Society, at least in our recent history, we've typically done tours in two main ways. The first way is the tour as the fundraiser, right? So special event tours, walking or car tour or bus tour or boat tour or whatever. And these happen on one date at one time, and you have to pay however much money to attend these fundraising tours. And the other is the self-guided tour, facilitated through a packet or a pamphlet of some type that has information about different stops that you can come into the Historical Society, pick that up, and then go do it at your own leisure. So these approaches have their advantages. With the fundraising tour, of course, the big bonus is that it is a fundraiser. It is a way to bring money into the Historical Society. Plus, people just like attending events, right? People want something to do sometimes, and this sort of tour gives them that opportunity. And we're still delivering an educational experience to them. On the other side, self-guided tours, the advantage is the flexibility. You can go on a self-guided tour whenever you want. You can do it at your own pace. And, cheaper, right, than the fundraiser tour option, typically free at most organizations, including ours. But this does leave a gap. The gap is the regularly reoccurring guided walking tour. So, with the other two types of tours that I mentioned, there are barriers to attendance, right? With the fundraising tour, you have to be available at the time that it's happening. And if you're not, oh well, I guess you miss out. And you also have to be willing to pay that fee, that ticket fee. On the other hand, while the self-guided tour allows the flexibility and allows, removes that barrier of cost, you also lose the live immediate feedback. The regularly reoccurring guided tour sits in a happy middle spot between those two options. It's not as flexible as the self-guided tour, but by offering multiple days and times where people can engage with it, it gives more people the option to come attend. Also, if they are run by donation, then it also removes the cost barrier to attend these sorts of tours, while still providing that opportunity for live feedback, for chances to ask questions, to ask for elaboration, to bring up topics that get sparked by something that is in the tour. So, that is what I've been doing. That was one of the very first programs I started here. Advance the slide. One of the very first programs I started working on at the Historical Society was the regularly reoccurring guided walking tour. So I've run two of these over the last year. The first was a Historic Churches of North Main Street in Canandaigua tour. And that ran from April through the end of July. And then the other tour I offered was a cemetery tour, which ran from September until earlier this month, actually. And I had these tours on a regularly scheduled basis. They were every other Thursday in the afternoon. There was no ticketing or admission cost to attend these tours, though of course donations were encouraged and quite often received. And with the cemetery tour, I also offered a Saturday option. The Saturday option was a huge success, so I definitely plan on continuing to offer Saturday options for future tours that I do. And just in general, these tours have been quite successful. Between both tour programs, there was only one day where I was offering a tour that I didn't have anybody show up. And the weather was not good that day, so I can't blame anyone for not wanting to walk around in the cold and wind and rain. But having these tours on a regular basis, it establishes this program that's constantly happening at OCHS. It keeps us in people's minds. It's advertising, right? People know that there's going to be tours going on. Also, people who have been on a previous tour may be interested to see what tours we do in the future. And so that gets people coming back to the Historical Society over and over again. And, nothing about the way we're running these tours is particularly groundbreaking, but it does represent a revitalization of a tour program, and generally, museum education. But moving on from adult education, let's talk about schools. Let's talk about school group programming. So, what we've got on screen here is an example, not from OCHS, but an example of a classic pillar of a museum education program, and that is the traveling trunk. Now, for those of you who don't know what a traveling trunk is, it's literally a trunk that is packed with replica artifacts and or documents that schools and teachers can rent from a museum or historical society or wherever, whatever organizations offer it in their area. They bring those items into the classroom and they use them as an aid in a lesson. So, the way this might work would be, let's say you've got a traveling trunk that's based on a Civil War soldier's backpack. So you've got a Civil War soldier's backpack in the trunk and everything that might be in it, and the teacher rents it, they bring it in, they pull it out of the trunk, they pass it around, let the students see it, handle it, see the things that were in it. After they've done that and the teacher has facilitated whatever notes that they have about what's in the trunk, they are then able to move on in their lesson about, say, the Battle of Antietam, right? So that's sort of the basic idea of how these work. More or less, the traveling trunk exists to serve as additional texture that teachers can use in what they are already planning to teach about. And OCHS had a traveling trunk program itself in the past. However, due to changes largely outside of our control, mostly in local school districts, mostly in administration in local school districts, those programs sort of fell by the wayside. Schools were just not as interested in booking these trunks, and they also became less interested in booking visits to the Historical Society as changes in districts started to take effect. So by the time I started the Historical Society, the traveling trunk program was, more or less defunct. Once again, through no fault of our own, that's just sort of the way things ended up happening. But, through talking with teachers over the last year to try to build a relationship, to try to reestablish some sort of school programming, one thing they said to both me and Cody was that it's hard to find time and to find willingness from administrators to travel to a location for a field trip. Justifying a field trip can be difficult. But they were still interested in doing some partnership with us, and they brought up the idea of trying to revive a traveling trunk program. Now, there's the traveling trunk program as it previously existed, right? It serves its function well. There's nothing wrong with adding texture to a lesson. There's nothing wrong with adding texture to a lecture. But I think we could do more. We could just make a traditional traveling trunk and hope that teachers will find it helpful. But since we're starting this traveling trunk program over anyway, why don't we design a traveling trunk that's going to be able to do more, that's going to be more helpful for teachers? So how do we redesign the traveling trunk? How do we take this idea? How do we redesign it? And I started by focusing in on what history teachers are looking for and what history state standards are looking for. Now, I'm not talking specifically about content, though that matters, but these are your things like your names, your dates, your facts, those sorts of details. I'm more looking specifically at what skills the history education is supposed to teach to students. And this is largely critical thinking, right? The history classroom is supposed to teach things like reading comprehension, the ability to analyze evidence, the ability to synthesize multiple sources of evidence together, the ability to construct an effective evidence-based argument. So, these are all what students should be learning in the history classroom, and generally, these are things that professional historians are doing as well. There's a really good metaphor that I'm not the person who made this metaphor, for the record, but there's a really good metaphor that good history work is like good detective work. Good detective work, it involves studying all the evidence available to come to a conclusion, and then adjusting that conclusion as more evidence comes to light. And that's more or less what historians do. So, in redesigning and evolving the traveling trunk, I want to keep this in mind. And so the result is a program that I'm putting together to introduce that I am dubbing the History Mystery Traveling Trunk. You can advance the slide. So the way these would work, this is me, and Cody was also with me, running a sample mystery kit to get an idea of the sort of activity that kids would be doing with this program. So the way this would work is like a traditional traveling trunk, a history mystery traveling trunk would be packed with replicas of documents and artifacts. But all these artifacts and documents would be in there to serve the idea that the kids are trying to solve a mystery. They would be presented with a mystery upon opening the box, and they have to work together in small groups to use what is given to them in the box to solve this mystery. So this drives a lot of those critical thinking skills. They have to be analyzing what's presented in front of them. They have to be constructing an argument. They have to be synthesizing all these things that they are provided together. So, this is obviously benefiting students in developing those skills. Also, it's hopefully fun. And study after study has shown that when you're having fun, you retain information better. Also, this benefits teachers. Instead of being an aid to a lesson that a teacher still has to put together themselves, this is a lesson in a box. This is a whole lesson in and of itself. So it's removing a whole day from a teacher's lesson planning schedule. Now, my fiance is a teacher, and I can tell you, if she could remove a day from her lesson planning schedule, that would be a huge relief. So, by rebuilding the traveling trunks in this way, by making them this history mystery traveling trunk, this lesson in a box, we're really providing a very quality educational experience for the students who engage in this. Now, we're still in the early phases of building this program, but the idea is to have a selection of these traveling trunks available to rent starting by the next school year. So, by re-envisioning the traveling trunk in this way, we will revitalize our school program. Because of course, if kids like these traveling trunks, OCHS is going to be connected to it. Kids are maybe then going to be interested in visiting us. Kids are going to then grow up and have fond memories. Just like kids have fond memories of the Pioneer Kitchen, kids will have fond memories of the chief villain of these history mysteries that I am naming the History Thief, that they have to catch in the mystery. So, it gives fond memories. It creates this tradition of kids being interested in this program. So, what do I want you to walk away from this talk with? Well, first, I want to really stress that the traditional museum educational programming is not bad and has not been bad. I mean, we wouldn't all be here if what we did in the past didn't work, right? Clearly it did. But times change and so must we. We've got to update the way we do things and incorporate new approaches, utilize new technologies, and stay tuned into current societal trends in order to stay vital and relevant for today. So that's why the theme is re-envisioned and revitalized. It's not about throwing out what we've done in the past, right? That's not how we'll be successful. The way we're successful is we take what has worked in the past and find ways to evolve those things, to update those things, to re-envision and revitalize those things for today and for the future. So, thank you so very much. I hope you're as excited as I am to see how we continue to change and evolve in the days, months, and years to come. So thank you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.